They told me the night shift at Arroyo Creek Clinic would be quiet. Desert towns usually are. But on my first night, the head nurse handed me a folded slip of paper with 7 rules. The ink was smudged, like someone had rewritten it 1,000 times with trembling hands. Don't question the figures in the hall after midnight, it read. And never, under any circumstances, answer the phone after 3:33 a.m. I thought it was a joke. That was before I heard the screaming in room 6, the one that's supposed to be empty. I took the job at Arroyo Creek Clinic because it was supposed to be simple. A 6-bed facility in the middle of a desert town barely clinging to relevance. More ghosts than community. The pay was decent, the benefits solid, and they were desperate. They didn't even blink at my short resume, or the fact that I'd just left a high-intensity ER job after a breakdown. They only asked one question. Are you okay being alone at night? I said yes. I shouldn't have. Arroyo Creek sat 5 miles out from the main road, surrounded by flat, baked earth and hills that looked like they were melting into the horizon. The building was squat and beige, its only defining feature the flickering red neon cross on the roof that buzzed even in daylight. The town it served was more or less dead. Population under 300, most of them elderly or too stubborn to leave. The clinic mostly handled minor injuries, medication refills, and the occasional scorpion sting. Or so I was told. I arrived for my first night shift just before 10 p.m. The sun had sunk below the hills, casting the landscape into that surreal twilight where nothing feels real. Inside, the lights were harsh and sterile, humming softly overhead. The waiting room was empty, the chairs lined up like soldiers facing a war they'd already lost. An old radio on the counter played static, laced with something that might have once been a country song. Head nurse Marlene greeted me with a handshake that felt more like a warning. She was in her 60s, wiry and stern, with gray hair pulled back so tight I imagined her skull aching from the strain. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. Clock in, do rounds, don't leave the doors unlocked after midnight. Then she handed me a folded slip of paper. These are the rules, she said, like it was perfectly normal to receive a list of commandments before shift. Follow them, no exceptions, especially number 4. I unfolded it. 7 rules, written in jagged handwriting that looked rushed and desperate. 1. Never open the front door after 11:59 p.m., no matter who's knocking. 2. Always lock room 6 before midnight, even if it's empty. 3. Don't answer the phone after 3:33 a.m. 4. If you hear singing, hide. Don't look for the source. 5. Use only the east hallway between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. 6. Patients may come in without a pulse. Treat them anyway. 7. Don't let anyone wearing white into the clinic, no matter what they say. I laughed, nervously. Is this a joke? Marlene didn't blink. I'm serious. People who break the rules don't last long here. I wanted to ask more, but she'd already turned and was grabbing her coat. Her keys jingled like distant bells as she walked out into the night. I was alone before the door, even shut behind her. I tucked the paper into my pocket and looked around. The place was quiet, eerily so. No patients, no other staff. Just me, a row of dimly lit halls, and the buzzing red light outside the windows. The first hour was uneventful. I did a walkthrough, checked the empty rooms, review the logs. Room 6 was open and spotless, the bed neatly made, machine silent. I hesitated before locking it, but remembered Rule 2 and turned the deadbolt with a soft click. By midnight, the The silence had settled deep in my bones. At 12:17 a.m., the front door rattled. I froze. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. I moved toward the lobby, heart thudding. Through the glass doors, I saw a man standing just outside. Tall, pale, wearing a dusty cowboy hat and a weather duster. His face was shadowed, but something about him didn't sit right. He didn't move. He didn't wave. Just stood there, staring through the door like he could see my soul. He knocked again, louder. I looked at the clock. 12:19 a.m. I remembered the rule. Never open the door after 11:59 p.m. He pressed a hand to the glass. His fingers were wrong, too long, too jointed, like insect legs. I backed away. I didn't run. Not yet. Then he smiled. Teeth too white. Too many of them. I ran. Back to the nurse's station, heart hammering, hands trembling. I killed the lights. Sat in the darkness, barely breathing. After a few minutes, the knocking stopped. I didn't look to see if he'd gone. I stayed there until 1:03 a.m., staring at the clock like it was a lifeline. I forced myself to get up, to check the rooms again. Everything was still quiet, still empty. At 2:07 a.m., I remembered Rule 5. Use only the east hallway between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. I was headed to the supply closet in the west hall when I paused. Something felt off, like the air had changed. Thicker, more humid. I heard something dragging. Then, faintly, a voice. I saw the nurse. It was coming from the west hallway. I turned and walked the long way around through the east hall. Whatever was in the west corridor, I didn't want to meet it. At 3:01 a.m., I heard singing. A child's voice. Sweet, soft, echoing through the vents. Ring around the rosy. My blood ran cold. Rule 4. If you hear singing, hide. I dove into the janitor's closet and shut the door. The tiny room reeked of bleach and mildew. I sat on an overturned bucket, holding my breath as the song grew louder. Ashes, ashes. The voice was outside the door now. I could hear tiny feet padding softly across the linoleum. Something giggled. A high, breathy giggle that didn't sound like it belonged to any child. Then it was gone. I stayed there for 10 more minutes before creeping out. At 3:32 a.m., the phone rang. My heart seized. 1 minute before the curse time. I stared at it, frozen. It rang again, and again. At 3:33, it stopped. Then it rang once more. I couldn't help it. I picked it up. There was no voice on the other end. Only breathing. Wet. Labored. Then, something whispered, "Room 6 is open." I slammed the phone down. Room 6. I'd locked it, hadn't I? I ran down the east hall, every instinct screaming. The clinic felt wrong now, distorted. The walls pulsed slightly, like they were breathing. The lights flickered above me, casting warped shadows that didn't quite follow my movement. I reached room 6 and stopped. The door was open, wide. Inside, the lights were off. I could make out the shape of the bed, and someone sitting on it. I stepped back. The figure raised its head, eyes gleaming in the dark, a smile too wide for its face. "You forgot the rule," it rasped. I ran, back to the nurse's station. I locked every door I could. I sat beneath the counter, clutching the rule sheet like a lifeline. The rules were stupid, insane, and every one of them was real. The rest of the night passed in a blur of silence and paranoia. At 6 a.m., the sun began to rise. At 6:05, the day nurse walked in. "Rough night?" she asked, breezing past me. I didn't answer. I just handed her the keys with shaking hands. That was the first night. and I was already planning my resignation. But something kept me from leaving, because as I walked out into the desert sun, dazed and sleep deprived, I saw the man in the cowboy hat again, watching from the edge of the sand, waiting. The desert air outside the clinic was cool, but not comforting. As I stepped off the cracked tile entryway into the Sand Street parking lot, the rising sun cast long shadows behind every cactus and shrub, making even the smallest rocks seem menacing. But it wasn't the landscape that froze my blood. It was the man in the cowboy hat. He was standing exactly where I saw him in the middle of the night, just off the gravel path, near a half-dead Joshua tree. Still as stone, no blinking, no breathing, just there. I blinked, and he was gone. For a moment, I considered never coming back. I could vanish, toss my ID badge into the wind, take a bus east, and never look back. But something had hooked itself into me, like a spine-deep splinter. Curiosity, or maybe something darker. I went home, barely slept, and returned the next night. The clinic looked normal at a glance. Silent, clean, boring. But the moment I walked in, I felt it again. That dense, invisible pressure sitting just beneath the fluorescent lights. Like the building itself was waiting, watching. Marlene wasn't there this time. A man named Thomas greeted me instead. Mid-30s, glasses, unshaven. He had the look of someone who'd lived through too many sleepless nights and made peace with the fact that nothing made sense here. "You're the new one," he said without introduction. "You read the rules?" I nodded. "You followed them?" "Yes." "Good." He handed me a clipboard with the same patient log I'd seen the night before. Empty columns, no signatures. Ignore the whispers. And if you hear tapping on the ceiling after 2, don't look up. That rule wasn't on my paper. Before I could ask, he left. I was alone again. By 11 p.m., I had locked room 6, unplugged the front phone, and stocked all the emergency cabinets. I even taped the rules above the nurse's station desk. This time, I planned to survive the shift. At 11:43 p.m., the lights flickered. Just once. I looked up for my coffee. Everything was still. Then a sound drifted through the hallway. Humming. Not quite singing. More like someone trying to remember a lullaby they hadn't heard since childhood. I froze. Too early for singing. Not the right voice either. It was low. Male. Not childlike. Not delicate. It came from behind the walls. I stood, unsure if I should run or hide. Then it stopped. The silence that followed was heavier than the sound. At 12:09 a.m., I heard footsteps, slow, dragging ones moving down the east hallway. I crept toward the edge of the nurse's station and peered around the corner. Room 2's door was open. I hadn't touched it. Room 2 was one of the unused rooms. Last night it had been locked like the others. Swallowing hard, I grabbed the clipboard, switched on my flashlight, and made my way to the door. The room was dimly lit by a buzzing overhead fixture that kept sputtering every few seconds. The bed was untouched, the monitor blank, but the chair in the corner had been turned toward the window, and someone had drawn a smiley face on the glass in what looked like blood. I backed out slowly and shut the door. Then I locked it. As I turned, I heard a knock at the front entrance. 3 slow taps. Not again. I didn't look. I knew better. Instead, I returned to the nurse's station and sat behind the counter, legs folded beneath me, breathing quietly. The knocking didn't come again, but the phone, despite being unplugged, rang. 3:12 a.m. I stared at it. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Then it went silent. I waited. At 3:33 a.m., the lights died. Complete darkness swallowed the station. Only my flashlight gave me sight, and it flickered like something was draining it. Then the whispers began, soft at first, like wind in a field, then clearer. "She's in here. She broke the rules. Let us in." I clamped my hands over my ears and squeezed my eyes shut, but the words kept seeping through, like water through cracks in stone. I turned the flashlight toward the hallway, and for a split second, I saw shapes, twisted, lurching forms with too many limbs and no faces, crawling along the walls like insects made of smoke. Then they were gone, and the power returned. I ran another round through the rooms, checking every door. Room 6 was still locked, but room 5 now had its curtains drawn shut, despite being empty the night before. Against my better judgment, I opened the door. The room was dim. Dust motes danced in the flashlight beam. The monitor was off, the bed empty, but the four-bag was full and dripping. Even stranger, someone had turned on the intercom mic inside the room. I could hear breathing coming through the speaker, raspy and slow. A voice followed, "Nurse." I dropped the clipboard and ran. Back at the station, I scrawled down a note under my printed rule sheet. New rule number 8. If the intercom turns on by itself, don't respond. At 4:12 a.m., the hallway lights turned a deep red. No warning, no flicker, just instant crimson, as if soaked in blood. The air grew thicker, like I was breathing steam from a tomb. Then the alarm sounded. Room 6. The monitor was beeping. Heart rate detected. 187 BPM. Impossible. That room was locked. I pulled up the hallway camera feed. Black screen. No signal. I opened the drawer for the emergency tranquilizer kit. Empty. That made no sense. It had been stocked last night. I knew it had. The alarm kept beeping. I had a choice. Stay hidden and let whatever was in room 6 do what it would. Or face it. I made the wrong choice. I walked to room 6. The hallway felt longer than before. The lights above me buzzed with that unnatural red glow, and the walls seemed to breathe in time with my heartbeat. When I reached the door, I found it open. The room was dark. I stepped inside and clicked on the flashlight. The bed was occupied. A man lay there, eyes closed, chest heaving. His chart was clipped to the foot of the bed. Name, unknown. Age, unknown. Admitted, 3:33 a.m. Diagnosis, observed. I stepped closer. The man's skin was paper white. His lips moved slightly, forming silent words. His eyes suddenly snapped open, revealing milky pupils and irises that spun like whirlpools. He grabbed my wrist and whispered, "You're not on the list." I tore free and ran. Back at the station, the clock read 5:47 a.m. The sun began to rise shortly after. The red lights faded. The intercom died. Room 6 was empty again, but on the counter in front of me was a new slip of paper. This one was typed. No handwriting. Revised protocol for night staff. Effective immediately. 1. Do not attempt to identify patients from room 6. 2. If a patient calls you by name, do not respond. 3. Keep all mirrors covered. 4. If you find a second version of yourself in the building, do not engage. 5. New shifts begin at 10:04 p.m. and end precisely at 5:59 a.m. Do not stay past that. 6. Additional rules will be issued as phenomena evolve. Below that, a final note in red ink. You're being watched. Be grateful. It hasn't touched you yet. I didn't sleep when I got home. I sat on my couch, holding the paper, reading it again and again. It wasn't just a haunted building. It was changing, learning. adapting, and I was now part of whatever game it was playing. They say the desert is a dead place, silent, still, and barren. But out here, silence is a lie, and stillness is just a trap. I came back from my third shift to the clinic thinking I'd be prepared. I followed every rule. I memorized every protocol. But nothing prepares you for the moment your reflection starts moving before you do. I stood outside the clinic just before 10 p.m., staring at its pale stucco walls and flickering porch light. The place looked like any backroad urgent care building, plain, old, functional. But I knew better now. This wasn't a place. It was a predator, a maze that changed when you weren't looking. A trap baited with rules you only understood after you broke them. The automatic doors hissed open at exactly 10:04 p.m. I stepped inside. No staff this time. No Marlene. No Thomas. No sign-in sheet. Only a folded piece of paper on the front desk with one line written in thick black marker. There is only one of you. Make sure it stays that way. I froze, staring at it, heart pounding. That wasn't paranoia. That was a warning. The hallways were darker tonight, not because the lights were dimmed, but because the shadows refused to retreat. They crawled along the edges of the walls, clinging to the corners like mold. The air buzzed with the subtle, high-pitched whine of flickering electricity, a sound I was starting to associate with danger. I checked the patient log. Blank. Again. But room 3's door was ajar. That was new. I moved toward it slowly, clipboard in hand, and gently pushed it open. The room was empty, save for one thing. A full-length mirror had been dragged from the hallway and propped against the wall opposite the bed. It hadn't been there before. We didn't even have mirrors in patient rooms. Clinic policy. Because reflections were dangerous. I turned to leave and stopped. My reflection didn't. It smiled. I didn't. It raised a hand. I didn't. It opened its mouth and mouthed one word. Run. I stumbled backward and bolted out of the room. The door slammed shut behind me with a force that rattled the lights above. I looked back just in time to see my own reflection still standing there, watching me from inside the glass. It wasn't me. Back at the nurse's station, the intercom clicked on. Static buzzed for a second before a voice whispered through. Room 6 is awake. I grabbed the rule sheet, now with 10 rules. The new ones were typed on a separate slip underneath the original list. I read the latest edition aloud. Rule number 10. If your reflection moves on its own, avoid all reflective surfaces for the remainder of your shift. If you see a version of yourself outside a mirror, do not engage. I grabbed a roll of surgical tape and began covering every glass surface I could find. Window panels, display screens, even the stainless steel cabinet fronts that reflected just enough to show a face if the light hit right. It took me 40 minutes. When I returned to the nurse's station, a second clipboard had appeared on the desk. It was identical to mine. Same scratches, same patient log, same handwriting. Only the pen ink was fresh, and my name was written in someone else's cursive. Suddenly, the hallway lights blinked, and I heard footsteps, identical to mine, moving down the west corridor. I stood and peeked out. There I was. Same uniform, same face, same expression, but I wasn't walking. I was gliding. Too smooth, too silent. It passed under a flickering light, and for a split second, its eyes were black, hollow, sunken. It turned its head toward me and smiled. I ducked back behind the counter and pressed myself to the floor. The lights went out, all of them. The air grew cold and thick, like I was breathing in ash and old paper. A whisper passed by my ear, Not from the intercom, but real, wet and close. You don't belong here, but I do. I waited until the emergency generator kicked in, bathing the clinic in a dim red backup glow. The hallway was empty again, but that second clipboard was still there. And so was something new, a page torn from a patient chart, resting on the nurse station keyboard. I picked it up. Patient name, Marlene Thornton. Status, replaced. Room void, scrawled beneath in black ink. She broke Rule 4. Don't smile at your reflection. My stomach dropped. Marlene hadn't just left. She had been taken, and something had taken her place. I grabbed the old staff roster binder from under the counter. Thick, dusty, pages warped with age. Inside were names of every night nurse who'd ever worked at the clinic. Most of them had check marks beside them, but about 10 had been stamped in red ink. Removed. Each of those names had their file ripped out. Mine was still there. No check, no stamp, but someone had written a single word next to my name in pencil. Pending. Suddenly, a crash echoed from the break room. Glass shattering. A scream, short and strangled. I ran toward it, keys in hand, flashlight wobbling in my grip. The door was half open. Inside, the vending machine had been smashed inward, the lights inside blinking erratically. The fridge door swung wide, and a reflection stared back at me from the stainless steel surface. It was me, but older, pale, blood on my neck. It whispered, "Don't run. They already know your face." The door behind me slammed shut. I whipped around, but no one was there. The lights flickered, and I heard the unmistakable echo of my own voice, laughing from the hallway. I didn't laugh. I turned and bolted back to the station. But as I ran, the hallway stretched. Every step I took, the nurse's station moved farther away. I looked over my shoulder and saw myself chasing me. Twisted grin, blood-caked shoes, holding a scalpel. The walls bent inward. The floor pulsed under my feet like flesh. I was trapped in the clinic's shifting maze. Then, just as suddenly, I collided with something solid. A wall. The hallway had ended in a place it hadn't before, and beside me was a door marked Observation. I hadn't seen this room before. It wasn't on any floor plan. Inside, the lights flickered weakly. The room was circular, lined with monitors showing different parts of the clinic in real time. One screen showed room 6, still empty. Another showed the front desk, still vacant. A third showed me, sitting at the nurse's station, but I wasn't there. The version of me on screen looked calm, smiling, writing something. I leaned closer. On the monitor, I turned to the camera and held up a sign, "Stay where you are." I turned around. Behind me was a mirror, one I hadn't noticed. My reflection wasn't moving, because it wasn't mine. It stepped out of the glass, and I blacked out. When I woke up, it was 5:58 a.m. The red lights were gone. The air was normal again. I was in the nurse's station, alone, or so I thought. On the desk was one final paper slip. "Shift complete. You survived. For now." And below that, "Welcome to the permanent roster." I stumbled out into the desert dawn, eyes burning from the light, wondering how much of the night had been real, and how much had become real because I saw it. In my car mirror, I caught my own reflection. It winked and smiled, but I didn't. When you think you're safe, you're most vulnerable. I left the clinic thinking I survived, but the rules weren't just for inside. They followed me home. And now, something is crawling through the vents, whispering my name in voices that aren't mine. After my third shift ended, I told myself I was done. I told myself I wouldn't go back. that I'd imagine the shadows that moved wrong, the duplicate that wore my face, the reflection that winked when I didn't. But even as I drove home, dust rising behind my car in the orange burn of dawn, I felt it. I wasn't alone. My apartment fell off the second I stepped in. Not wrong, exactly, just copied. Like someone had tried to recreate it from memory. The couch was on the wrong side of the room. My coffee table was missing the scratch I got when I dropped the plate 2 weeks ago. My cat, Leo, didn't come to greet me. He always did. Instead, I found him crouched on the kitchen counter, eyes wide, ears flat, staring at the AC vent above the fridge. I followed his gaze. Nothing there, just stale air. I tried to shower the night off me, but even the steam couldn't scrub the feeling away. I avoided the mirror. I didn't want to see if it was still me on the other side. But I slipped up. I looked, and my reflection wasn't standing still. It was smiling. Again. This time, its mouth moved. "You brought it home." I didn't wait for it to finish. I slammed the mirror door shut, cracking the glass in the corner. Leo hissed and darted down the hall. The lights in the bathroom flickered, brief, rhythmic, almost like Morse code. I didn't want to decipher it. That night, I barely slept. The noise began around 2 a.m., a soft scraping in the vent above my bed, like nails, then whispers. They started quiet, like wind rustling through dry grass. Then they grew distinct. They knew my name. They knew the rules. "You skipped Rule 11, one of them said. I didn't have a Rule 11, not on any list. I sat up, sweating, heart racing. The whispers continued. "If you leave the clinic without being dismissed, it follows." I grabbed the only object that felt like a weapon, my flashlight, and climbed onto the dresser. I aimed the beam into the vent above. Something moved. I saw fingers, mine but thinner, too long. They gripped the slats for just a moment before vanishing. That was enough. I packed a duffel bag in 10 minutes and drove. I didn't even lock the door behind me. I wasn't going back to the clinic, but I had to find answers. Had to know if anyone else had experienced this. I remembered the old roster book, the names marked removed, the files torn out. I needed to find someone who used to work the night shift, someone who escaped. The only name I remembered that wasn't red stamped or torn away was handwritten at the bottom of the last page. E. Radix, 1997, voluntary leave. I searched for hours, scanning online databases, dusty old message boards, even calling local unions. Finally, I found a match. Eleanor Radix, 67, living 2 towns over in a gated retirement community. I showed up at her front door just after sundown. She opened it before I knocked. She looked like she hadn't aged in 20 years, but her eyes were tired. She stared at me for a long moment, then stepped aside. "You stayed longer than 3 nights, didn't you?" she asked. I nodded. "Then you've already let it in." I sat in her living room, listening as she poured us both lukewarm coffee and lit a sandalwood candle. Her hand shook as she struck the match. "I was the last one before Marlene," she said. "Before her, there were others. Each generation of night nurses. Every few years, the clinic calls one." Calls. She gave a humorless laugh. "You think people apply to that job?" "No. It finds you. A classified ad. A posting you don't remember clicking. An interview you don't recall scheduling. Then one night you're standing under the floodlights in the desert with a contract in your hand." I didn't respond. She was right. She sipped her coffee. "The rules aren't about keeping you safe," she said. "They're about containing what's inside. Every broken rule is a crack. Eventually, the cracks spread. What happens when they do?" She looked at me. You get replaced. Her living room lights flickered once, then steadied. She looked toward the hallway. "It's already here, isn't it?" she whispered. The air turned cold. A soft scuttling sound echoed through her vents. The candle blew out. Then came the whisper, softer than before, but unmistakable. Rule 12. Never speak to the former nurses after 3 visits. Eleanor stood slowly. "You need to go," she said, voice tight. "Now, before it roots in." I hesitated, but the walls groaned softly, as if breathing. I ran. As I drove back through the desert, I saw the clinic's lights in the distance. Though I wasn't headed that direction, they were on, and someone was waving at me from the front window. It was me. Back in town, I checked into a hotel. I told myself I just needed one normal night. One night away from reflections and rules and whispering vents. At 3 a.m., the front desk called. "Miss Radix left a message for you," the clerk said to check the mirror in the hallway. I hung up without responding, but I checked anyway. In the mirror outside room 212, a message was written in red lipstick. "If it speaks in your voice, don't answer." That's how it gets in. That night, I didn't sleep. Every vent in the room rattled. And just before dawn, I heard my own voice whisper from beneath the bed, "You forgot Rule 13. By morning, I made my choice. I had to go back to the clinic. Not to work, not to follow the rules, but to end whatever had followed me home." I arrived at dusk. The lights were on. The door opened before I reached it. A clipboard was waiting on the counter with a note in block handwriting. "Welcome back. The shift never really ends." I picked up the clipboard. It was warm, almost breathing. And then I saw the new list. Updated rules. Night 4. 1. Do not arrive before 10:04 p.m. 2. Never enter room 3 unless summoned. 3. Avoid reflective surfaces after midnight. 4. If you see yourself, walk away. 5. Don't talk to patients not listed on the log. 6. If the lights flicker more than 3 times, hide. 7. Never eat or drink anything offered by staff. 8. If something follows you home, don't bring it back. 9. Vents are not for airflow. 10. Don't answer your own voice. 11. If the clinic calls you by name, run. 12. You're not the last. 13. Once replaced, there is no return. 14. If you read this far, it's too late. I turned around. The front doors had vanished. The walls pulsed. A familiar voice called from the hallway. "Hey, you forgot your name tag." I saw her. Marlene. Only it wasn't her anymore. Her smile stretched too wide. Her hands twitched in stop-motion spasms. Behind her, others stepped into the light. All nurses. All replaced. All me. The clinic was never just a building. It's a trap with walls that remember and vents that whisper your name. I broke the rules, and now the rules have changed. I thought I could escape, but the clinic isn't letting me go, and I'm starting to forget who I am, or was. The hallway swallowed the sound of my footsteps. Every echo felt delayed, like the building was replaying my actions a second late, just enough to feel off. I clutched the clipboard, its surface warm and vibrating faintly, almost like a pulse. The others stood in the corridor behind Marlene. There were 5 of them, nurses in faded scrubs with hollowed faces. I recognized each of them. I'd seen them before, not in life, but in the black and white photos that lined the staff break room, the in memoriam wall. Except now they moved. Their heads twitched in unison, not toward me, but toward the doors lining the hallway. Room 3, room 5, room 6. All began to creak open. I tried to speak, to ask Marlene what this meant, but my throat felt stuffed with sand. No sound escaped. She took a step toward me. "You shouldn't have come back," she said softly, with my exact voice. I turned to run, back to the front doors, to anything that looked like an exit, but the lobby was gone. In its place was a vast, wide hallway that stretched into darkness, walls stitched with breathing veins. The air smelled sterile like hospitals do, sanitized and artificial, but underneath that, something foul seeped in: mildew, copper, rot. The overhead lights blinked out one by one, following me down the corridor as I ran. Behind me, footsteps, some barefoot, some dragging. I didn't look back. Not yet. I turned a corner and slammed through a heavy door marked "Employees Only." It wasn't a room I recognized from my time here. This one had no ceiling, just a black expanse above, like a sky that had forgotten the stars. The room was filled with beds. Hundreds, each occupied. Each patient had no face, just a smooth patch of skin where features should be. Their chests rose and fell in perfect unison. A mechanical hum echoed from somewhere above, as if the building breathed along with them. Then, every head turned toward me. At once. Even without eyes, I knew they saw me. That's when the rules started appearing, on the walls, carved into the plaster with something sharp. Rule 15. Never enter the ward after night 4. Too late. The siren sounded, low, groaning. The kind of alarm that wasn't designed to alert people, but to wake something. The beds began to shake. The patient sat up, and I ran. I burst through the next door and found myself in the staff break room. Same flickering light, same humming refrigerator, same coffee pot that never worked. But now, the in memoriam photos were updated. They showed me, over and over, different versions of me in different uniforms. RN, CNA, nurse practitioner. Every photo framed in black. One had a cracked corner. One was burned around the edges. One was wet. The last one had no eyes. I backed away from the wall and turned toward the table. A file sat there, closed and labeled in red ink. Final shift. Case number 070. Amelia Vaughn. That was my name. I opened the folder. Inside was a single piece of paper. My own time card. Clocked in at 10:04 p.m. 4 nights ago. No clock out recorded. A drop of blood hit the page. Then another. I looked up. The ceiling was bleeding. No, that wasn't blood. It was ink. Ink spelling something across the walls. Who were you before this? I screamed, or thought I did. The sound died in my throat. I staggered into the hallway, where the walls were warping, expanding, and contracting like lungs. My steps felt heavier, as if the floor tried to suck me into its veins. Then I saw her, the real Marlene, not the twisted mimicry I'd encountered earlier. She stood at the far end of the hall, hands folded, eyes glassy. Her nurse's uniform was spotless, her smile soft. "I thought I could save them too," she said gently. "Thought if I followed the rules, I could leave." Her voice cracked, but the rules were never for us. I stepped closer, shaking. What are they for? Her smile faded. "To keep the thing inside," she whispered. "But every time someone breaks a rule, it learns. It changes. Now it doesn't just wait inside." She pointed at me. "It followed you. Now it's free." The walls screamed. Every light exploded at once. Glass rained like confetti. The hall convulsed. Floor tiles flipped. Doors cracked open like jaws. And from every vent came my voice. Thousands of versions of it. Some screaming, some laughing, one repeating a phrase again and again. You forgot Rule 0. The world shattered. When I woke up, I was in a bed. In the clinic. Wires in my arms. Machines beeping softly. Fluorescent lights above. A man stood at the foot of the bed in a white coat. He smiled. "You're awake," he said. "Welcome back, Nurse Vaughn. You were out for quite a while." I tried to speak, but my mouth was dry. He turned and picked up a clipboard. It looked familiar. Too familiar. He began to read. Orientation Protocol, Night 5. I shook my head. "No," I rasped, but he smiled gently, ignoring me. Rule 1. Never arrive before 10:04 p.m. I screamed. He kept reading. That night, I worked the floor again. Not by choice. The clipboard was back in my hand. My scrubs were clean. My name tag polished. The halls were quiet. Too quiet. I saw myself in the window glass. But it wasn't me anymore. She smiled when I didn't. Waved when I walked away. Behind the nurse's station, the phone rang. I didn't answer it, but it rang anyway, endlessly, until I picked it up and heard my own voice say, "Time to clock in. If you're hearing this, if someone forwarded you this log, or if you found the clinic, don't go. Burn the posting. Delete the message. Forget my name. Forget yours. Because if you step inside, it knows. The rules won't save you. Not anymore. They never did."